Before time, there was nothing, only chaos, drifting mist and silence from this void. The first gods emerged, shapeless and divine. The elder Kami grows weary, and so they retreat to the newly formed earth, seeking rest. In this dream, he sees humanity teetering on the edge of an abyss, their civilization on the verge of collapse. Alarmed by this premonition, the young god awakes with a start, his ethereal form shimmering with concern. But their slumber is troubled, and it is here that our story begins. They are the Kami, and their emergence ushers in the dawn of existence. As the universe expands, these primordial deities drift across the face of the cosmos, birthing stars, shaping planets, and infusing life into the formless void. Onmitama, along with the villagers, emerges from the trees to witness a sight that takes their breath away. One is a young woman named Tamomo, her expression filled with suspicion. Despite the other's reverence, she remains skeptical of the Kami's intentions. With a heavy heart, he reveals to the villagers the dire state of humanity's future, a truth that has shaken him from his eternal slumber. Despite the grim prophecy, the Kami assures them that all is not lost. There is still time to change the course of history, but it will require the cooperation of both gods and humans. The other is a wizened old man, his face etched with wisdom and concern. They will stand by the young god's side, ready to face whatever challenges lie ahead. Together, they will strive to create a better future for humanity, one that aligns with the celestial will. He senses the gravity of the Kami's presence and the troubled times that lie ahead. Standing before them is a young man of ethereal beauty, his long hair flowing in the wind and his eyes filled with warmth. This is the young Kami who has come to Earth on a divine mission. People pause in their daily activities, sensing the divine energy that envelops the land. Onmitama and the villagers retreat to the safety of the forest. Here, amidst the ancient trees, they prepare to withstand the coming darkness and whatever trials it may bring. The old man, Tamomo, and the others share a worried glance. They know that the road ahead will be fraught with peril and uncertainty. But as the night deepens, they find solace in their shared purpose and the hope that dawns in Onmitama's determined eyes. As he descends, the forest parts before him, creating a path towards the village nestled in the valley below. The youngest of the Kami stirs, first drawn from his eternal sleep by a vision. But the other Kami remain fast asleep, their dreams undisturbed. And so the young god, driven by his innate compassion, decides to act. He will save humanity from the brink of destruction, even if it means acting alone. As he journeys to Earth, we are treated to a breathtaking spectacle. The heavens part before him, revealing the vast expanse of the universe and the beauty of creation. Stars twirl and swirl, forming a majestic backdrop to the young god's celestial flight. Taking flight, the young Kami soars through the heavens, his heart heavy with determination. Upon reaching the earth, the young Kami's presence is immediately felt. Onmitama is on his way to the river to collect water when he first notices the sky above him begin to swirl. Intrigued, he stops to watch as the clouds part and a radiant light illuminates the ground. In this village, we meet our protagonist, Onmitama, a young man known for his unwavering determination and kind heart. Suddenly, a voice echoes across the valley, commanding everyone to gather at the riverbank. But not everyone shares the villagers all hidden. In the shadows, two figures watch intently. The young Kami's gentle demeanor and youthful appearance belie a profound sadness that lies within him, touched by the Kami's compassion and alarmed by his prophecy. The villagers pledge their support as the sun sets over the horizon, casting long shadows across the valley. The young Kami. From the top of high heaven, Izanagi and Izanami gazed down at the swirling chaos below. Nothing existed yet. No mountains, forests, or fields. Not a single blade of grass or cry of a bird. The two of them had been sent by their father, the head of the pantheon, to bring order to this watery abyss. The vast expanse of the sea stretched unbroken, an endless watery grave. A large floating rock was slowly making its way toward the shore. They watched as it came to rest on the bottom of the sea, creating a small, dry island. "We must create an island," Izanami told her brother. Together, they birthed the islands of Japan, and with them, powerful deities. By the time they reached the fifth island, Izanami could barely move. Izanagi stayed by her side, stroking her hair and singing ancient lullabies until a great crack split open the mountainside, and out stepped a massive lion with flaming fur and eyes like molten gold. It roared its thanks to its mother before bounding away to explore its new home. She collapsed onto a nearby mountain, exhausted and in terrible pain. The first were the gods of wind and rain, born of the first island. Then came the mountains, the rivers, the forests, and the grasslands, each holding within it a spark of the divine. As he ran around the island, he accidentally ignited the grasslands, setting the entire island ablaze. Izanami screamed in pain and agony. Her body burned and blistered, and she knew that she was dying. There he found her sitting on a magnificent throne, her face hidden behind a golden veil. He was distraught, but knew that there was nothing he could do. His sister had become a part of the underworld. Her passing had brought death and destruction to the world of the living. So he turned and walked away, leaving his sister to her eternal slumber. But despite her beauty, the air around her was cold and still. She did not speak, did not move, and worst of all, she did not recognize her brother. And so the two of them made their home on that island. Izanagi stumbled back, horrified at what he had just seen. His sister was gone, leaving him alone on an island that was now nothing but scorched earth and smoldering corpses of the previous inhabitants. Izanami became the goddess of the sun, radiant and warm. Izanagi took on the form of a great serpent, coiling and twisting around the islands, weaving his body into the rocks and earth. They wove beautiful garments from reeds and settled in for what would be a very long task. The joy that had once filled him was gone, replaced by a deep sadness. Still, he pressed on, creating new life to honor his sister and to ensure that her death was not in vain. Creating an entire nation would take a lot of time and effort, and they would need all the help they could get. But as the two of them stood there surveying the watery wasteland, Izanagi noticed something odd. First, they joined hands and waltzed around the island 7 times in a ritual called the Dance of Creatio. Then they dipped a jeweled spear into the swirling waters of the sea and stirred. The water boiled and bubbled and soon hardened into 8 great mountains. More dances and incantations followed, and the islands grew larger, greener, and more beautiful. "It seems our work has already been done for us," Izanagi said with a smile. So Izanami reached out to her sister, Izanami, and together they began to shape the land. With each island that formed, the two sisters felt a surge of power, a divine energy that flowed through their veins. As they continued their work, Izanami and Izanagi took on different forms. But with each new island that formed, the labor pains intensified. "I cannot go on," she cried. "The child is coming." The newborn was none other than the fire god, Kagetsuchi, one of the most powerful deities in the pantheon. And so, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she faded away, her spirit slipping through the cracks in the burning island and disappearing into the underworld. Grief-stricken, Izanagi searched for his sister's soul, following her ethereal footsteps all the way to the underworld. Izanagi reached out to touch her, but his hand went right through her like she was nothing but smoke. Alone once again, Izanagi continued his work, though now he was burdened by his grief. The wind whispers tales of creation across the celestial fields where Izanagi and Izanami dance. They spin and twirl to deities of the void, birthing the first island of the earthly realm. They are one of the most important couples in Japanese mythology, the progenitors of the Japanese islands and the ancestors of all the Japanese people. And their story began not on earth, but in the heavens. Here, high above the world, Izanagi and Izanami were just two among many gods. They descended from the heavens hand in hand, walking across a bridge that stretched between the celestial fields and the vast watery abyss below. This was no ordinary bridge, though it floated freely in the sky, appearing only when the gods traveled to Earth, and it would carry them safely across the infinite void so that they could fulfill their task. It was here, on this first island, Onogoro, that Izanagi and Izanami would dwell, washing over the land they had created. But when the other gods took their leave and went down to Earth to create villages and cities, these two stayed behind. Izanagi and Izanami were too perfect for each other, their love too great, and their bond was blessed by the heavens themselves. And even today, their story is told in the gentle lapping of waves on the shore, a reminder of the boundless love that brought the islands of Japan into being. If you enjoyed this myth, please hit the like button and share it with your friends. For more mythology and folklore delivered straight to your device, subscribe to the channel and have a good one. And in the distance, they saw the glimmer of something hard and sharp jutting up out of the water, an immense rock that had fallen from the sky and become stuck in the ocean depths. Taking their places on either side of the rock, Izanagi and Izanami prepared to do the work of creation. Then he thrust his blade upward toward the pillar and let the clay drip onto the tip of the ring. With each drop, more and more land was created, hardening into place the moment it touched the water. In her right hand, Izanami held a jeweled box filled with all the dirt and clay that would form the first island. And in her left hand, she held a mirror to reflect the light of the sun and moon. And before her stood a tall, thin pillar topped with a circular ring. No one knows why they lingered in the heavens, but soon they would be called upon by the divine. The gods needed someone to shape the land below, and Izanagi and Izanami were the best for the job. Below them, the surface of the sea churned and frothed, stretching as far as they could see in every direction. With this rock as their anchor, the world could begin. Then Izanagi stepped forward and dipped his sword into the box of primordial earth, coating the tip with clay again and again. Izanagi repeated this process until the end of the first day, until the water receded and revealed a new island, the first of many to come. And they ruled for many generations, giving their names to mountains, rivers, and valleys, until the time came for them to pass on their duties to their children. In later myths, the couple became known as the Children of the Sea, living in a palace at the bottom of the ocean and ruling over all the water and all the life it contained. This has been the legend of Izanagi and Izanami, the creators of the land. Now, when Amaterasu emerged from the water, she was so brilliant that her father could not look upon her, so he turned away. And it is said that this is why the sun sets in the west, because Amaterasu's father could not bear to see her beauty. Oh, my! He washed his face with the water of the sea. But from those waters sprang forth 3 shining figures. The one who came forth first was the god of the moon. Now, the one who came forth second, he was a fierce god of the storm, a powerful warrior. They were afraid of the darkness, and they were afraid of death. And so he decided to return to the underworld and rescue his wife. Yes, Izanagi descended into the underworld, and he called out to his wife, Amaterasu. "Oh, Amaterasu, where are you?" And when he uncovered his face, Izanagi saw that he had been transformed into an old and withered man. And when he told the other gods what had happened to him, they were very surprised. And that is why, oh, my dears, the ancient Japanese believed that the sun and the moon and the stars controlled their fate. The sun, which gave them light and warmth, was their most precious treasure. The moon, which guided them through the darkness, was their most loyal friend. The goddess of the underworld took pity on Izanagi and gave him a magic potion. And the stars, which twinkled above them, were their most steadfast companions. Oh, my goodness! And she said to him, "Drink this, and it will restore your youth." But when Izanagi drank the potion, nothing happened. The magic potion had no power over him. And so the goddess of the underworld took off her robe and wrapped it around Izanagi. And as he put on the robe, he felt his strength returning to him. His old bones were replaced with new bones. His hair turned from white to black. His face lost its wrinkles. His eyes regained their youthful sparkle. And when he looked down, he saw that he was once again a young and handsome god. But there was no reply. Only the sound of his own voice echoed back to him. And so he continued his journey deeper and deeper into the underworld. And the one who came forth third was none other than Amaterasu, the sun goddess, whose light would lead Japan for all time. Her hair was flowing like a waterfall, and her skin was as white as snow. And when she turned her head, Izanagi saw that her face was like the face of his wife, Izanami. But no, it was not his wife. It was a goddess of the underworld. And she said to Izanagi, "Why have you come here? You cannot stay here. If you stay here, you will die." And then she began to cry, and her tears fell like rain upon Izanogi's head. When they first emerged from the waters, they were naked. So Amaterasu took a special jewel and hung it around her neck. She took a sharp sword and held it in her hands. And then she took a mirror and looked into it. And upon seeing her own beautiful face reflected back at her, she smiled and laughed and danced for joy. And from that moment on, Amaterasu became known as the goddess of the sun, of light, and of the brilliant smile. And then she and her two elder brothers went up to the high plane of the sky where they built their divine palace. Oh, yes, Izanagi and Izanomi had done all that they could to create and shape the islands of Japan. Now they had given birth to the gods of the land, the mountains, the rivers, and the sea. They had brought forth the gods of wind and rain and thunder and lightning. They had created the sun, the moon, and the stars. And now they had blessed Japan with 8,000 islands. All of the work was done. The divine task was complete. So Izanagi and Izanomi decided to take a long journey to the distant land of death. They walked hand in hand across the bridge that led to the underworld. And when they reached the other side, they knew that there was no turning back. And sitting by the lake was a beautiful woman. Izanomi became the ruler of the underworld, and Izanagi returned to the land of the living. Yes, he became the god of fertility and procreation, and he taught mankind how to plant rice and grow food. He showed them how to fish and hunt and raise cattle, and he taught them how to live in harmony with the gods of the land. Now, many years passed, and Izanagi noticed that the people of Japan were living in fear. He walked through the dark and narrow passages, and he came to a great lake, and he cried out in pain, and covered his face with a black cloth. Yes, with renewed strength, Izanagi was able to return to the land of the living. The tale of Izanagi and Izanomi is one of the foundational myths of Japanese culture. The story from which the Japanese people believe their islands and their very existence were born. And yet it's also a myth fraught with tragedy, doomed from the start by the irreversible nature of death. It was here that Izanomi died, trapped forever in the belly of the mountain. Heartbroken, Izanagi descended into Yomi, the land of the dead, to bring her back. But the world below was dark and rotten, and he fled in terror. In part 1 of this series, we followed the two as they journeyed to the distant land of Anagoro Island to gather the materials needed to create the islands of Japan. As he looked around for a way out, he saw a small hole near the top of the cavern wall. Izanagi called out to her, but she did not answer, and so he crept closer, hiding behind a large rock to get a better look. Startled, she let the spoon clatter to the ground, and it was then that Izanagi noticed how truly horrific his wife had become. Her body was emaciated, her skin stretched tight over her bones, which protruded through her rotting flesh. Just when he thought he had lost her, he felt the hot breath of her like a furnace on his neck, and he knew that if she caught him, he would be dragged down into the same abyss that had consumed her. Her fingernails had become long and sharp, like the talons of some predatory bird. What is less clear is whether the myth is trying to tell us that grief can be overcome, or that it is an experience we must endure alone. Maybe it's about the process of accepting death, not resisting it, because in Japanese mythology, death is as much a part of the natural order as life itself. Izanagi was successful in escaping the underworld. But at what cost? He had to leave his wife behind, and he never forgot the horrors he saw on his journey. In fact, he shared the story of his experience with the other gods, and they in turn shared it with the humans. That's how we know the story today. And in that moment of pure exertion, he realized something. He was experiencing the world exactly as his wife had experienced it when she first brought life into being. He was creating the islands of Japan all over again. But this time, he was doing it alone. And her teeth were now yellow and crooked, like the fangs of a snake. Crawling through the hole, he found himself in a narrow passageway filled with the stench of decay. But it was a stench that was somehow familiar, so he pressed on until he reached another chamber. With a flick of her wrist, she summoned a pair of sickles and hurled them at her husband, who dodged just in time to avoid being cut in half. Izanagi fled, running for his life through the twisting tunnels of the underworld. When Izanami died, she was carried down to the underworld by a group of funereal deities. They laid her to rest deep within the belly of the mountain at the edge of the sea, surrounded by the tools of her trade, the jeweled mirror that was her emblem, and the 8-pronged sword that was her weapon. Then they sealed the entrance to the cave with rocks, turning away only Izanagi, who begged to be allowed to follow his wife into the underworld. "Let's jump in." Only then did he turn back to the cave and call out to his wife, his voice echoing through the darkness like a lonely flute. And there in the middle of the cavern sat his wife, looking as though she had aged thousands of years. Her hair had turned grey and hung in long, greasy strands down her back. Her face was pale and rotten, her eyes vacant and soulless, and her once beautiful voice was now a croaking whisper. But there was no reply, so Izanagi did the only thing he could think to do. He gathered up great stones and used them to block the mouth of the cave, creating an eternal barrier between the land of the living and the land of the dead. Izanagi wandered alone along the shore, consumed with grief, until the sun set and the moon rose. Then he descended into the underworld, moving deeper and deeper into the earth until he came upon a large cavern filled with a black, sticky mud. Startled by the sight of her, Izanagi stumbled backwards, falling into a nearby pit. There before him sat Izanami, her back to him, slowly stirring a huge cauldron that bubbled ominously over the fire. Izanami was stirring the potion with a large wooden spoon when suddenly she turned round. Izanami recoiled in horror at the sight of her own reflection, but then she turned back to Izanagi, and he saw that her face was contorted in a silent scream. Behind him, he heard the clatter of his wife's footsteps as she pursued him relentlessly, calling out to him in a voice that dripped with hatred and despair. But Izanagi refused to give up. He pushed himself to run faster, to breathe harder, to live more purely than he ever had before. And that realization gave him strength to keep going, to keep pushing forward until he finally reached the exit of the underworld and collapsed on the shore, gasping for breath. It's clear that this myth is a metaphor for the experience of grief. But maybe the real story isn't about escaping the underworld, but about the journey through it. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, check out more from our channel. where we explore the strange and fascinating world of Japanese mythology. Emperor Jimmu, the first ruler of Japan, is said to have descended from the gods, specifically from Ninigi, the grandson of the sun goddess Amaterasu Omikami. We'll learn more about Ninigi in a future episode. Under his rule, Japan would emerge as a formidable power in East Asia, rivaling the Korean kingdoms of the time, the three kingdoms of Korea, and the Chinese dynasties, the Shang, Zhou, and Qin. The Japanese army marches forth with their emperor at the head. The sun climbs higher in the sky as golden light bathes the Yamato plain in its glow. Jimmu's black hair flows in the wind as he prepares to take his first shot. Before Ojinoka, the islands were ruled by local chieftains with no overall authority to control them all. He is said to have established many of the early institutions of Japanese government, including the court system, the tax system, and the legal code. It was a genre of Japanese art that flourished during the Edo period, which lasted from 1603 to 1868. Some of the most famous ukiyo-e artists include Katsushika Hokusai and Utagawa Hiroshige. We really wanted to capture the essence of ukiyo-e in this episode, especially through the use of color and the depiction of nature. Ukiyo-e artists often used bold, vibrant colors to depict the beauty of the natural world, as well as the bustling streets of Edo, Tokyo. We tried to emulate this style in our depiction of Jimmu's rise to power, showing not only the lush landscape of the Yamato plain, but also the energy and excitement of his army as they march forward under the banner of the rising sun. He also implemented a series of economic reforms that helped to stimulate trade and agriculture, laying the foundation for Japan's future prosperity. It really helps us out. And as always, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. According to legend, Ojinaka was a semi-divine chieftain who united the central and northern regions of the archipelago, bringing them under the rule of the Yamato clan. His grandson, Jimmu, continued this legacy, expanding the empire even further south to the island of Kyushu. From there, he led his armies north to conquer the region of Kanto, establishing the Yamato court as the supreme authority over the archipelago. Atop the nearby Mount Miwa, atop this mountain, he will rule over his empire, and we can see his warriors in the foreground readying their bows as well. They are ready to conquer the land of Yamato, a plain nestled between mountains and ringed by forests. In the distance, the sea shimmers under the morning sun. This will be their new capital city. But for now, let's focus on his descendant, Jimmu, who was born in 715 BCE and became the Emperor of Japan in 660 BCE. That makes him the 34th in a line of 128 emperors that lasted for over 2 millennia. Jimmu's reign marks the beginning of Japan's classical period, which would end with the fall of the Han dynasty in the year 400 CE. Jimmu leads his warriors under a rising sun. It's a beautiful morning in the year 660 BCE. Let's get into our scene here. Jimmu raises his bow high above his head. His warriors stop and turn toward their emperor. To the west, the mountains guard against invaders from the Asian mainland. To the south, the vast ocean separates them from the Korean peninsula. To the north and east, the forest provides ample resources and wild game. In the center of the plain, Rivers branch out like veins, carrying water from the mountains to the sea. Here, rice paddies and fields of millet glisten under the sun. Women in long, flowing robes tend to crops while men in loincloths fish in the river or cut down trees in the forest. Villagers go about their daily lives. The peace and prosperity of this land will be what Jimmu and his descendants are known for. Their armies will conquer much of the archipelago and enforce the rule of the Yamato court. In fact, it was Jimmu's great-great-grandfather, Ojinoka, who is credited with uniting the various tribes and creating the state of Yamato. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to show your support. But it wasn't just brute force that made Jimmu such a powerful ruler. He was also a skilled administrator and lawmaker. The art style of this episode is heavily influenced by ukiyo-e, literally meaning pictures of the floating world. Thank you so much for watching. In the beginning, there was nothing. No heaven, no earth, no sea, not even darkness or light. But then, bam, the world was born, and with it, the gods came into being too. There was only a great big void. Hi, I'm here to tell you about the very first stories ever recorded in Japan. As each new emperor took the throne, he would send scribes out across the land to gather as many old stories as they could. These traveling bards would then perform those tales at the court, keeping the traditions and history alive. Stories so ancient they predate even the country's name. So in 712, Empress Genmei commissioned a huge project to gather all the myths and legends that had been passed down through the oral tradition and record them in writing. Copying down these ancient texts was a slow and laborious process, but it wasn't written by her or any other member of the imperial court. Instead, the Empress appointed a team of experts, led by two guys named Ono Yasumaro and Abe no Nakamura. And if you know where to look, you might even find a few stories scattered throughout the internet. So if you're ever feeling lost or confused or just need a good story, take a cue from the ancient Japanese and dive into the Kojiki. You never know what kind of wisdom or insight you might find. These guys weren't just scribes. They were historians, mythographers, and poets all rolled into one. They combed through the oral traditions and selected the most important stories to include in the Kojiki. They also added their own commentary and analysis to help explain the myths for future readers. The scribes had to use special tools to scrape the bark off the bamboo stalks and then use an iron stylus to make raised characters on the soft inner fibers. Ink was made from black, sticky tree sap, and the paper was made from the bark of the gampi tree. The whole process was so time-consuming that often the scribes would copy down one character a day. If they were lucky, and mistakes were costly, if a character was copied incorrectly, it could change the meaning of the entire passage. So the scribes had to be incredibly careful. A single scribe is hunched over a scroll, painstakingly copying down ancient stories in elegant cursive letters. Above him, images of gods and monsters flicker and dance in the lamplight. The stories in the Kojiki continued to shape Japanese culture for centuries to come, inspiring art, literature, and even religious practice. And it all started with a team of dedicated scribes who took the time. to record Japan's rich oral tradition. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until then, keep learning and stay curious. The room is silent except for the scratching of his brush. Each stroke is precise and deliberate as he works by the dim glow of the candle. This monumental task would take over a decade to complete, but the result would be worth it. The myths and legends were compiled and written down for the first time in the Kojiki, which literally means record of ancient matters, tales that were once memorized and recited by wandering storytellers, then compiled and written down for the very first time during the reign of Empress Genmei. You see, up until the 8th century, the Japanese royal court had no official written history. Their records were kept on people's memories. But as the centuries passed, more and more emperors began to worry that important stories might be getting lost or forgotten. Now let me take you back to the year 712. It is late at night, and an oil lamp flickers, casting long shadows across a wooden desk. They were a way of explaining the world and humanity's place in it. The first section of the Kojiki is called the Komiyochi, or Myths of the Gods. It tells the stories of how the world was created, how the first humans came to be, and the deeds of all the gods who played a part in it. There are some pretty wild tales in here, like the story of Izanagi and Izanami, the primordial gods who swam in the cosmic ocean and stirred it into existence. The Kojiki was created during the reign of Empress Genmei, or the tale of Susanoo, the storm god who smashed the mountains and created the islands of Japan. It was an instant hit and quickly became one of the most important texts in Japanese history. These myths were not just stories to be enjoyed. They provided a sense of order and meaning to the Japanese people. And by recording them in writing, the scribes hoped to preserve this legacy for future generations. But it wasn't easy. But they weren't working in a vacuum. After 10 years of work, the Kojiki was finally finished. Today, you can still find copies of the Kojiki in libraries and museums around Japan. So what should we talk about next? Let me know in the comments below. The year is 710, and the place is Japan. A humble but determined ruler has just founded a new capital city. But it's already too late. For centuries, the gods have had their eyes on this land, imbuing it with spiritual power. Now, as the emperor makes his way to the palace, he walks through a literal gateway to the heavens, and all around him are the trappings of a divine right to rule. In order to accomplish this, he must first establish a strong base of power in the heart of Japan, a place where he can draw strength from the myths of old and use them to forge a new empire. For centuries, the various clans of Japan fought for supremacy, burning the capital cities to the ground and killing anyone who stood in their way. As a result, many of the common people look upon the emperor and his court with suspicion, wondering if this latest experiment in centralized authority will end in bloodshed like the last. And the emperor knows that winning the loyalty of his subjects will be as difficult as it is vital. So he found the capital at Nara, named for the ancient gods of the land. Along the way, he'll encounter all manner of challenges, from natural obstacles to the remnants of rival clans. But with each victory, the emperor's legend grows, and the people of Nara begin to rally around their new leader. So every year, as the cherry blossoms fall, he holds a festival to honor the gods of old. And with their coffers overflowing, the nobility begin to vie for the emperor's attention. Some wish to fund massive construction projects to prove their worthiness. Others seek to expand the empire's borders and bring more wealth and power to the crown. It is up to the player to decide how the emperor will respond and what kind of Nara he wants to leave behind for future generations. Will it be a shining beacon of prosperity or a tyrannical dictatorship? Only time will tell. The only problem is the gods of old aren't exactly well documented. There are legends of a golden age when the islands were ruled by 8 divine rulers, each more fabulous than the last. But the details are hazy at best. And here, where the Kumono River flows from north to south, he built his court. Did the first humans come from the stars? Were the islands shaped by the battles of the gods? Each myth has a unique story, some of which feature cameos from well-known figures in Japanese mythology. But each version ends the same way, with the deification of the first emperor and the establishment of the Yamato dynasty. With a renewed sense of purpose, the emperor returns to the palace, ready to chart the course of his new empire. Or did divine beings rise up out of the sea to claim the land for their own? If the emperor is to win their loyalty, he must show them, not tell them, that he is the rightful heir to the gods. And so he sets about proving his divine right to rule. But in order to do so, he must travel to the 4 corners of his domain and subdue the spirits of the land. Some are benevolent and eager to help, while others are malevolent and will oppose the emperor's every step of the way. Depending on the player's choice, the oracle will tell a different story, one that will shape not only the culture of Nara, but also its relationship with the rest of Japan. But these imperial trappings mean little if you don't have the wealth to back them up. And the surrounding provinces are in no mood to pay their new capital any heed. Can the emperor make Japan his own, or will the nation simply fall into chaos? Welcome to Nara, where the great emperors of myth have become flesh and blood. By 794, myth had laid the foundation for an empire. To the east, there's the Tadaiji Temple complex, which houses the Buddha and was once the center of the imperial court. And in the north, there's Kasuga Taisha, a shrine dedicated to the gods of light and fertility, whose influence helped bring the emperors. Forces to this very spot, these 3 locations will play a major role in the game, both narratively and mechanically, but for now, they stand as silent witnesses to a past that refuses to stay buried. The capital moved to Nara, and Japan's history began in full. Take a moment to pan across the new Nara capital. On the far side of the valley, court nobles stroll along a causeway. In the distance, pagodas scrape the clouds, and in the upper right, way off in the distance, the faint but distinct echo of gods fades into the rising sun. As we move from right to left, the camera will stop on each of the 3 points of interest, giving the player an early glimpse of what this city has to offer. To the west, there's the Great Buddha, built in 749. This massive statue is one of the world's largest and an enduring image of Nara. After centuries of warfare, the Yamato clan has emerged victorious, and their emperor has set about the task of uniting the nation under a single banner. But even as the palace walls were raised, voices of dissent echoed throughout the land. In order to temper these doubts, the emperor has decreed that the wisdom of the ancients will guide the decisions of his court. As such, when the emperor sits down to consult the oracle of the gods, he must choose between several possible myths, each of which paints a different picture of the past. And as the emperor listens to the words of the oracle, the screen will fade to black, giving way to a brief animated sequence. But the oracle's words have done little to calm the fears of the populace. The further the emperor travels, the more the screen will shift towards an overhead perspective, allowing the player to control the emperor directly. As the emperor's power grows, so does the wealth of the Nara court.